So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I think we can start of our ZEB Talks. So, I'm Yang Siyan. I'm from the CABR. So first of all, I want to welcome to the series of the seminar, Sino-Swiss Zero Emission Buildings Seminar Series, ZEB Talks. So it is done by CABR together with the Swiss consortium, intep, Skat. So the topic is under the zero emission building. So this is the 10th time that we are holding this seminar, and this is the last one we have. So the topic here is also very special. We will try to review the ZEB talks we have. So first of all, I want to introduce the guests we have invited. We have from the member of our Swiss set, GAO Hui from SDC, the Senior Program Officer, and also from the CABR, Dr. ZHANG Shicong, Senior Researcher. We also have from the Wesley Wojtas, Team Leader of ZEB China and Skat, and also the Chief Representative of China for Energy and Swiss Green Building Association, Wang Ze. And also from the China side and from the Swiss side, we have our team members. So first of all, I would like to thank SDC, Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development, and also that the Green Building Association of Switzerland. I want to thank for their support. So according to the agenda, first of all, I will give the floor from SDC GAO Hui, Senior Program Officer, to share with us about the government cooperation, the achievement, and the future outlook. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, good afternoon. So today, I'm very happy in the last one of our ZEB talks to talk about the background of our project and the future outlook. So can you see my slide? Okay, so today I want to share with you SDC and also the Swiss innovation and Chinese practice, what we have done, and also how we can go towards a zero carbon building future. So first of all, I want to introduce the SDC and our work in China. We are the Swiss government agency responsible for implementing the Swiss Confederation's foreign policy. So China, in climate change, is the most important country in the world, especially that in the CO2 emission, China is also the biggest emitter. So for SDC in China, we work with the Chinese government to respond to the climate change and environmental issues. We also promote strategic dialogue in international development cooperation and strengthen cooperation in emergency and disaster relief. In 2009, we have our China office. We have already successfully implemented projects on the flood risk management in the Yangtze River Basin, sustainable groundwater management, low carbon cities, and clean air, and many other projects in climate change. So the ZEB talks we have organized, like today, actually is under the framework of the energy saving and emission reduction in buildings, because buildings is a very important sector. About 40% of the emission are related to the buildings. At the same time, buildings is where we have the strength, no matter in Switzerland, in the building design or standard. And Chinese government is encouraging the energy saving. in building sector, especially in 2022, that the President Xi has announced, in 2020 has announced about the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. So both parties have kicked off the cooperation in the energy saving in building sector. So in November of 2020, the ambassador of Switzerland have signed an agreement with the ministers of the MOHURD. Under the MOU, after about half a year of the design, in May of 2021, we kick off the phase 1 of our project. Our ZEB framework has the framework under the MOHURD and SDC with the policy guidance. There are implementation agencies, the CABR, China Academy of Building Research, and from the Swiss side, we have selected the most leading and renowned companies, intep, Skat, AMPA, etc., to implement these projects. At the same time, we also invite a lot of the industry associations from Switzerland and from China that to participate in this cooperation. So I think later, we will also listen to the presentations on the private sector. So based on our teamwork and collaboration, we have done 3 parts in the past few years. First of all, we have introduced some of the leading energy and environmental standards and technologies for buildings to support the research in China. For example, I have listed here some leading technologies, mandatory standard, voluntary standards, energy efficiency label, as well as the standard and expertise. So through our collaboration, they have been incorporated into China research. For example, China is drafting the zero carbon building technology standards, and also the roadmap for the carbon peaking of buildings in China. Based on the research, we have also organized many capacity building programs. For example, this is the 10th ZEB Talk we have. So through this online platform, we try to disseminate the knowledge and expertise from these projects. So in the future, I think we will try to organize more diversified offline activities. For example, work with some local industry associations and a training center under MOHURD, universities and research institutes, and we can provide capacities to the local government officials, scholars, and students. So based on the research and capacity building, we have also selected some demonstration projects. In April last year, we have selected first batch of demo site in Shenzhen, the sport center in Shenzhen, and a school building in Shaoxing. And in Fangshan in Beijing, there is a community center. So our teams have been working with the local designers, and we provide the technical recommendations, consultancies to help them to meet the zero carbon target after more than 1 year of the cooperation. This project have already basically finished design or even under construction. In February this year, we have selected the second batch of the demo project, including Dalian Hutan residential community, which is a very big community. Another one is in Hanzhong Liuba County. It's a bee museum. And then we have also selected Taixing Waterworks, multifunctional building. Jiading Future City Exhibition and Market Halls in Shanghai, and also the Wuxi Fund Park. phase 2 is an office building. So we have selected the second batch of the 5 projects. So you can see that the coverage of our demo project has been very wide, covering the major climate zones in China with various functions. We may have the third batch in the future, but when choosing the third batch, we will focus on the cold zone in China and retrofitting of the existing buildings. So we will continue to follow up and to provide guidance to the design and construction of this project. And also, we will work with the local governments for capacity building and standards setting, as well as the industrial sector. So that is the profile of where we are. And I think later we will have the experts from our team to talk about the achievement. Thank you much. So thank you very much, Ms. GAO Hui. Thank you for your sharing, for helping us to understand the China-Swiss project. So now I will give the floor to the CABR senior researcher Zhang Shicong. Dr. Zhang Shicong will give us the overall review of the ZEB Talks. He will also talk about the latest update on the zero carbon buildings. And if you have any question, please, you can type in the question in the chat box. In the Q&A session, we will try to answer your question, Dr. Zhang. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Gao, and also our teams from the ZEB Talks. So good afternoon, and also good morning to our Swiss friends. I'm very happy that in the 10th ZEB Talks, or the last one, that I will provide a review of the ZEB Talks. I will also share with you that under this project, the technical standard update of zero carbon buildings in China, and also the future work plan, like Ms. Gao mentioned. So Ms. Gao has already talked about our ZEB Talks. It is actually under the Sino-Swiss Zero Emission Building Cooperation Project signed by MOHURD and SDC. So after the project has been signed, because we have a pandemic in the past 3 years, so most of our discussions will have been moved online. From the beginning of last year or the end of the 2021, we started to think about how to promote the technical cooperation between China and Switzerland, and to choose the topic carefully, which will contribute to the future carbon emission. And we want to maximize the benefit of that. So last year, after 3 months of the discussion, from April, we basically hold a monthly webinar of the ZEB Talks. So this year, today is the number 10. So we've already have the 9 talks. The first ZEB Talk we held was how Switzerland meets its zero emission targets for 2050 plus in building sector. Because China proposed to have peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. So all our carbon work is concentrated on these 30-60 targets by Chinese government. So we try to look at a very general pictures and what are the experience from the Switzerland. In the first ZEB Talks, we have invited Professor Stefan Kessler from Infras. He talked about the 3 pillars for successful implementation of the zero emission buildings: norms, legislation and enforcement as the first pillar, which is also the same as our understanding.
This is actually works in line with our previous understandings. We are going to lower down the carbon emissions for a building which has existed for 100 years. The second pillar is about capacity building. Well, we are coming up with a very leading topic, a very forward-leaning target and missions. So how can we motivate all the constructors, all the engineers, and all these staffs participating in the upstream and downstream and really enforce and act on it? It needs the capacity building. Thirdly, we need policy incentives, pilot project, as well as the motivations from the leadership. I think Swiss has a very good experience in terms of the incentives, subsidies, and we also have subsidies in China, and these are their experiences. And at that time, from the Chinese side, we have invited Mr. Xu from our institution to give us a brief introduction toward the business as usual in the construction industries, and also our peak time, and also our 2030 and 2060 target. There's another different policies about the policy acceleration scenarios. If there is more leading scenarios, that is the number 3 policies. Are there any possibilities that we can move the carbon neutrality and carbon peaking earlier than before? So we have introduced the pathways and methodologies that we were adopting. For the second session, we have invited a comprehensive planning methods for the zero emission building process, because for the cities and also for the urban areas, energy systems, among other different infrastructure which can be connected with the building, is also quite important by deciding it. So on the second part, we have invited Professor Andrew Anterberg to join us. He has introduced us Swiss experiences in the net zero buildings and also the lower carbon buildings. In a greater community, it needs the coordinations between the team. It also needs the genius ideas from the civil engineers, from the building designers, and from the actual builder. Every single different team needs to improve their own performance. Thirdly, in China, we have introduced us our latest progress in these areas, the Chinese practice in the lower carbon emissions, as well as the net zero carbon emission. We have used the lower carbon center in Shenzhen as one example, as well as the exhibition hall in Shenzhen as another examples, to illustrate how did we set up the examples as a lower carbon demonstration areas. How can we make the energy as a part of the inventories while trying to complementary to each other at the same time? This is the topic for the second session. For the third session, we have shifted the focus back to the previous one, because for the long term and for the short term, for the larger areas and the small areas, we finally should translate our experiences into the community. In China, 80% of the building is located in one block of the community, because inside of the community, the carbon emissions reaching for around 70%. How can we facilitate the communities? Let the community has a very good public transportations, enriching public life, and at the same time, it also can help us to achieve a lower carbon emissions in the community level using the renewable energy at the best. So under the lectures from Professor Daniel, he has introduced us Swedes' experience in promoting 2,000 watts communities and also the pilot project Swedes have done before. In China, we have also invited the chief researcher from the Scientific Promotion Centers of the MOHOD, Madam Liu Younong. She introduced us about Chinese progress in the green communities, the policy support, as well as the zero carbon demonstration areas of the Shenzhen Damenshan areas. This is the content for the third time's lecture. For the fourth time, because the previous three ones is about the medium and long-term logs. The fourth session has been focusing on one major technologies, because we believe technologies can be really leading the development of the industries. To our understanding, in Swiss, they have something like a prefabricated buildings. All the different modules can be plugged in and connected. So this is an experimental platform which has been shortened for NEST. The English is like the next generation technology experience platform. That is the reason why we are really honored to have Professor Masses. He introduces the core part of the Switzerland's platforms and how can we learn from the Swiss experience. And he also taught us about his previous experimental result. From the Chinese side, we have invited researcher Professor Xu Wei to introduce to our Swiss colleagues about the first Chinese full-size near-zero emission building technology platform. We can do the experiment on top of this. We can also call it the future lab, where the futures of the building lines. So this has been located in our Tongzhou laboratories. So there is 6 blocks of the buildings. Each block of the building covers 1,800 square meters. I believe Swiss experience, they are more flexible. And for the Chinese experience, I think that we are thinking from the long term. That is my personal ideas, but which might not be right. So for the fifth session, we have been talking about the circular construction. We talked about the full life cycles of the buildings, especially the embedded carbon emissions during the life cycles. We have invited Professor Marvin King and also Sina Brutner, 2 professors from Swiss. They have introduced us the usage of the building material. How can we select the best building material? How can we reuse the building material? How can we redesign and repurpose the building? How can we reduce the carbon emission during these life cycles? Because the carbon emissions, to our knowledge, we usually call it 2+3, reuse, recycle, and also the repurpose. But from the Swiss colleagues' experience, they have 12 different ways. And let's talk about the Chinese experiences. We have invited Professor Wu Jianlin from CABR to introduce us our research institutions, quantitative analyzing of the fiber and wooden structured building in China. So compared with the traditional iron and steel concrete building structures, the wooden structure can cut or decrease 64.5% of the carbon emission during the whole process. At the sixth session, we went back to the energy centers. That is to say, one energy center in one community. So here, we have invited Professor Mattis to give us about how to use the data and algorithm to build an energy hub modules and how large the area this e-hub can cover, and what kind of equipment and a facility that we can connect it with the e-hub. And also, finally, the designs of these e-hubs. At the very beginning, under the support of this project, we have also want to develop a Chinese e-hub, like Professor Mattis's introduction. That's the reason why we think it's a very important lecture. So from the Chinese side, we have invited Professor Yu Zhen to give us an introduction toward the energy inventory technologies and the near zero energy emissions. This is also belongs to the 35-year national plan. So if the building works in line, or if the building's energy consumption is 50% lower than the average numbers in the community, that is to say, the actual usage of the near zero energy emission community is actually achieving. So we should also think about for one community, what kind of energy storage hub should we facilitate for one areas. For the seventh session, we have invited Professor Karen, and this is a very unique question for all the building sector, because cement is one of the building materials which has the biggest carbon emission during the whole process. We talked about how do we lower the carbon emissions. In the process, we invited Professor Karen Savannah to introduce us the LC3 cerament and how can we came up with this special cerament and building materials, and what kind of role will this cerament plays while we are looking to lower down the carbon emission. From the Chinese side, we have invited Professor Meng Tao from the Zhejiang University. He is one of the cooperation colleagues. He is also from one of the famous universities in China, and Professor Meng Tao actually introduces us the cutting-edge local material and its leadership in the lower carbon technologies and the concrete materials. So this is the seventh lecture, and during the eighth time, with the progression of the project and also the betterment of the pilot project, we were looking forward that all these pilot projects can get Chinese certification. At the same time, we also hope that all of these projects can get their Swiss certification because it's a bilateral cooperation. That's the reason why we hope that all of our pilot projects can get the Swiss certification. We have invited the representatives from the ministry. Professor Andreas, he has introduced us Swiss practice in the past 25 years and how did Swiss promoted the energy certifications. So this is an energy certification about the net zero emission. From the Chinese side, and we have introduced you the expert report that we have summarized for the past 40 years. Across China and the past 4 years, we have done the net zero and carbon emission re-evaluations across China for the ninth time, because previously we have discovered that the Swiss experts have a really important emphasis towards the data materials, database. So the database supporting the development of the Swiss industry is really complete. So while we are doing the calculations, as we are diving deeper, it becomes one of the major focus for us is about how do we set up different numbers in a different team or without the different teams. Sometimes they are going to set up different configurations. This means that we cannot generate the collaborations between the different parties. So I think building a database is very important. That's the reason why we have invited Ms. Martina to join us. She called a whole life cycle carbon emission calculation modules. And this is a database where we are seeing that Professor Martina has given us an introduction and also the promotions of this database. So from the Chinese side, we have also invited Professor Wu Yanjia from the Zhejiang University.
We have invited Professor Wu Jiayan from Zhejiang University to talk about the research they have been doing and also how the construction material can lower the carbon emission. So that was the 9 ZEB talks we had before. So you can see we covered the long-term zero emission pathway. We have also covered about a zero carbon park and the platform and the database for the future, as well as the construction material to lower the carbon emission. So all the major topics related to the zero emission in building sector have been covered. So this is the review of the ZEB talks we had. And then I also want to share with you some of the link. If you are interested, you can watch the video we had. So, for example, like I want to talk about the national standard. So when talk about the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality, so this kind of work has been incorporated into the MOHARD action plan. And then that in 2021, in March, that the MOHARD has approved that to draft the standard of the zero emission buildings. It has also been led by our team. We have organized about 20 internal discussions, more than 10 external seminars, and we revised the manuscript, the draft, for 10 times. Especially the Swiss experts have put forward opinions and suggestions twice. In January and last year and this year, we have also incorporated the international opinions from Swiss experts to our work. So some updates. We expect by the end of March this year, we hope the standard will be public for solicitation. There are 6 key technical principles. After our discussion, we have basically reached consensus. The first one is about the carbon emission in building sector. Although IPCC has divided into that the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, some are the direct and indirect. But I think that for the buildings to be the end user of the energy, we need to lower both the direct and indirect emission, as well as the implied emission. So we have calculated all the direct and indirect emission. So low carbon, the NZEB, including direct and indirect carbon emission of operational stage. And also for the ZEB, it includes all the direct and indirect ones. The second one is the energy efficiency and carbon reduction standard. Because the energy efficiency is a compulsory standard, mandatory standard in China, it has also brought the significant impact. But now that the carbon emission standard, on the one hand, we want to raise the energy saving standard. We also want to draft the zero emission standard so we can have both energy efficiency and carbon reduction at the same time. The third one is that we have set the relative value and absolute value to control the emission. If we only use the relative value, it's easy. For example, we can say a percentage reduction compared with a benchmark. But the relative value will make us in lack of the absolute number. But if we set the absolute number, we have so many different kinds of the buildings in different climate zones. One indicator cannot be practical for all the buildings all over China. So even that for the large public space, for above 20,000 square meters, but it will be different for the building of 20,000, 50,000, or 100,000 square meters. So we have taken both the relative and absolute values. So as long as that they can meet either relative or absolute, we can consider that they are qualified. As for the emission reduction of buildings, on the one hand, because the building itself, the domestic burdens will be, the load will be impacted by the sunshine. We have also used about the rooftop and also the PVs. So in the standard, we have divided the building by building types, by climate zones, and also that by the overall that the solar resource level total radiation. So even in the same zone, that by different solar resources, there will be the different absolute value or the relative value. The fifth principle is that we have the constraints on the design. Because for the building, the carbon emission will be produced during operation. But during the design stage, if we cannot make the design to be the low carbon or zero carbon, it's almost impossible for them to achieve the zero carbon in operation. So from the beginning, at the design stage, we want to make sure they are the zero carbon building. So based on that, we have divided into low carbon building, nearly zero carbon building, zero carbon building, and whole life cycle zero carbon buildings. For these four categories, for example, residential buildings, by 5 climate zones in China and different solar resources, we have given the reference number of the kilogram carbon dioxide per square meters annually. We have also given the indicators for NZEB and ZEB. And also that for the public building, we also divide them into the small public, large public, small hotel, large hotel, shopping mall, teaching building, the medical building, etc. And also by different solar resource, we also provide them the carbon emission densities. So on the right side, you can see it's the relative carbon emission rate. We can see that the low carbon, the public building, is about the 35% or the 40%. Well, for the zero carbon public, you can see that the emission reduction rate is about 45%, 50%, or 55%. So these are the number we have given. And by the end of the March, it will be made public. Currently, we are already making the plan for the work of 2025 to 2030. So like I said, this is our last ZEB Talk. So in the future, we are going to focus on our demo side between China and Switzerland. In the past 2 years, like GAO Hui mentioned, we have selected 2 batches of the demonstration project, 8 projects in total. The first one was in Shenzhen, Nanshan Energy Park, the sports center. This building was done by the Jianxue, the design company. They also give it a name called the zero carbon, that the heaven and earth. So actually its design principle is to be environment friendly. Actually, that in February 15th, the Chancellor of Switzerland and also the Bianan, the embassy representative, and Miss GAO Hui from the embassy of Switzerland, Miss Wang Ze, and also that the contractors of this company, as well as the project owner of this project, have visited the site. So you can see the pictures that they have visited this sport center in Shenzhen. It has been using that the residue heat of the sewage and the garbage treatment. The second project was a school building in Shaoxing, Longshan School. It is located in Zhejiang, Shaoxing City. It is an education building in a school. They have 4 floors, underground, and 1 underground. And also, it's about 5,000 square meters underground, above ground. In 2020, in September, that we have the MOHERD, the representatives, and also that from the Switzerland and from the SDC, they have also visited this project for the launching ceremony. This project is expected to be finished by September of 2024. The third project is called the Community Center in Beijing, in Fangshan District. It is done by the real estate company and by Tsinghua School of the Architecture, Mr. Song, and also our CABR, Mr. Wu and his team, to provide this kind of low carbon consultancy. In July and August this year, this project will be finished. So currently, we are working with them on the publicity and communication. So these are the 3 projects from the first batch. So yesterday in the morning, we have just got the news that the MOHERD have approved our 5 projects in the second batch. The first batch is a Taixing Waterworks multifunctional building. It is done by the Zhongjian Environmental Development Company. It is located in Taixing of Jiangsu Province, 2,700 square meters, including exhibition, meeting, restaurants, and dormitory. So they use the zero carbon to operate the whole building. This project has also taken 100% of the sewage treatment and recycling. So for the China construction company, this is an important pilot project they have been doing. The overall concept is that they start from the carbon emission list. They want to have the zero carbon during the operation and low carbon in construction, plus the solid waste and the wastewater treatment. The second demonstration project is in Wuxi Fund Park 2. This is a culture and conference center. It has 9,500 square meters. It will be built into the first international the Zero Carbon Conference Center. It is built by the Wuxi Taihu Development Group Company. It is supported and authorized by Wuxi government to operate. It is a state-owned asset management company to manage this operation of this project. This project also uses the ZEB as its target. The third one is done by the Shanghai Huajian company. It is a Shanghai Jiading Future City Exhibition and Market Halls. It also aims to be the low-carbon project. So that means to reduce 30% of its emission. And also they want to build the local area into the near zero carbon sectors. But now they are also operating on this project 3,000 square meters.
And we are going to use this project as a demonstration areas for the lower carbon and zero carbon project. The fourth project is the Bee Museum in the Liuba County. So the project has been introduced by Madam GAO Hui before. It is a project sponsored by People's Bank of China. It is a national sponsored project as a part of the national poverty alleviation campaign to move the local people out of the poverty. So this is a comprehensive zero carbon building demonstrating the research in the bee culture, bee project, the honeys, and you can see that on the roof it demonstrates the shape of a bee hive. So we are also going to make the Liuba County as one of the pilot regions for the zero carbon areas. The final project that we have approved for the second demonstration project is the Dalian Hutan residential community. There are 39 buildings in this complex, 34 34 buildings for the common residents and households, 5 buildings for the college students to serve as their dormitory. So we are going to use the zero carbon requirement on the project, but it is going to be related about the construction requirement of these building blocks, building areas. These are the 8 projects that has been approved by Ministry by MOHUT, and I think in the coming 2 to 3 years we are going to see the actual implementations and also the buildings and also the real of this project. And we are also going to talk with the local governments. The final part I want to introduce you is that we are not going to have any public forum anymore. If you are interested in the China-Swiss project, you can follow the intep's official account and the WeChat, which is being called Intep Comprehensive Consulting Service. You can also follow our institution's official website. There is another account which you can follow. You can also follow the SGB's official account, which is being presidented by Madam Wang Ze. It is being called SGB Swiss Green Building. And for these WeChat account, we are going to actually update the latest work of our project. Secondly, in the Chinese YouTube, which is being called Bilibili, we have the recorded videos of the ZEB Talk. If you are interested in the ZEB Talks, you can search it on Bilibili, and then you are going to find the videos, and we have also recorded the Chinese and English versions of these sessions. You can also follow the website of the China PB organization.cn. We are going to update this project on this official website. We don't update the official website that often, but we are going to update it. So these are all the informations that we are going to publish. So please follow this official account and also our Bilibili account, and also please review our homepage. Today, I was really honored to summarize the content that we have exchanged before. And now I'm going to introduce you the work that we are going to do in the future. And we are also have 8 China-Swiss national ministry level pilot project. I am really honored and I'm looking forward to cooperate with you in the coming 2 years. Through our research, through our pilot project, we can really facilitate the zero carbon building development between China and Swiss. Thank you all so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Dr. Zhang, for your kind sharing. I've summarized the previous 9 ZEB talks, and now we are going to give the floor to Mr. Wesley Wojtas. He is the project manager of the project. So, Wesley, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Xingyang. Let me quickly unplug from the English interpretation. So now I only need to share my screen and we can start with my input. So yeah, ni hao and good afternoon to all Chinese colleagues and guests. Good morning to everyone joining from Switzerland. Also from my side, a warm welcome to this very special episode of ZEB Talk, in which we want to reflect and have already reflected on previous editions. And at the same time, we want to look forward to the next year and years of implementation and what kind of topics are on our radar next. But before I start properly, I want to express my gratitude also to our partners, especially the Ministry of Housing, Urban and Rural Development from China and the Swiss Development Corporation, SDC, who make such important exchange formats possible. I also want to thank all the Chinese and Swiss experts that contributed, as was shown by Professor Zhang earlier, to this ZEB Talk webinar series. And as Mrs. GAO Hui and Professor Zhang have already showed in a very illustrative and concise way, we had certain topics on which we focused during the last years. And my input now looks at, why did we focus on such topics? And my first slide now, I want to share the background, the methodological background and the strategy that lies behind the overall ZEB Talk series. And on my second slide, I illustrate briefly what the future topics are and can be as part of the Sino-Swiss cooperation. Eventually, we will have a look at future exchange formats. Then, as Mrs. GAO Hui and Professor Zhang already mentioned, due to the fall of travel restrictions, we have now new possibilities to foster exchanges, such as trainings and different physical meetings in China and Switzerland. So now to the first question, why did we choose these topics? If you look at the normal approach of products in the building sector, but also in the economy as such, we have usually a very linear approach from extraction of raw materials to the disposal of materials, and it follows these steps. However, there are carbon emissions coming up in all these steps, for instance, through the transportation of the raw materials, of building components, and so on and so forth. And this is quite carbon intensive. Then the choice of material supply at the very beginning can have a big impact on our carbon accounting. Then we have several topics within the supply chain that create the possibility to reduce carbon emissions. As you can see, I go a bit quicker now. There are a lot of topics when looking at the operational use of buildings and the maintenance of such. Now, usually the materials and the building components come to an end of life and will be either burned in an incineration plant or put on landfilling. However, we can also work around this end of life cycle by looking at the whole life cycle of the materials and look at how can we recover certain elements of the building components, how can we reuse or repurpose them, or even bringing it directly back to use in a different building, for instance. So this is the methodological background of our ZEB Talk series logic. And now looking at all these topics that we have here in the gray boxes, we had to select a few of them as focus areas. And on my next slide, I put now these gray boxes in a different order. And as you can see, our focus areas are in blue circles for the English following guests and in red circles for our Chinese listeners. We focus on these areas because here we see great potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we have a lot of experience in Switzerland that we can also share. At the same time, we are very much interested how Chinese experts tackle these areas within the life cycle approach of a building. I don't want to go into details what our previous ZEB talks looked at, as Professor ZHANG especially has in a very illustrative way showed that. However, as you can see, it lays within the structure. So we had quite a lot of input now looking at the policy making level on the ZEB, so Zero Emission Buildings, or ZEB, which is the Zero Emission District design, and on low carbon material, as well as on the operational energy use. Now, what I want to add to today's exchange is looking at the future topics. As Professor ZHANG said, we might not have any ZEB talks anymore, but there will be certainly different exchange formats, such as trainings or physical meetings. And the next step in our project is to take the national standard that is going to be published soon and provide Swiss experience how to adapt such standards into a local level. Switzerland has decades of experience with multi-level approaches. So from bringing legislations from the national level to the cantonal level to the municipal level. The canton is something like the state or the province. And we will also look into how to quantify the ZEB-standard impact. We want to foster the cooperation between CABR and Professor ZHANG's teams, together with Swiss leading research institutions, to look at the potential of, or the impact of such standard developments. Then also mentioned already before, the financial mechanisms, the incentives that are related to zero emission buildings need to gain special attention. And we want to focus in the upcoming year and years on financial mechanisms that serve a zero emission building sector. Now, looking at the different areas, for instance, operational energy use, we had exchanges before, but there is plenty of room to go into the depth of each topic. For instance, we heard that there was a ZEB talk about the eHub concept, but now in the next step, we want to practically implement an eHub in the first Chinese region or building area. So this is just one example when looking at these topics where we can really take an interesting aspect of this whole life cycle approach and go into the depth of it. Of course, everything what we do is always related to this life cycle assessment that I mentioned earlier. So the circularity of building components and of the whole construction sector will play an important role in the upcoming exchanges again. As here we are talking about the embodied emissions, it might not be the focus of the standard, and yet it is very crucial and important. So that is it already from my side. Just a brief note, as Mrs. GAO Hui and Professor ZHANG have mentioned all of the project-related activities. I just wanted to add why we focus on these topics and where do we come from. So thank you very much for your attentions. And as the Professor ZHANG also mentioned, the ZEB Talks can be found on Bilibili and YouTube. So if you have more interest in joining us, please stay tuned, and also to our WeChat account, of course. Thank you very much.
好的，那我们非常感谢
Okay,
Wesley
thank you very much, Wesley, for your sharing. And now we give the floor to our last speaker, that is the Chief Representative of China for Minergy and Swiss Green Building Association, SGB, Ms. Wang Ze. So she will talk about the China-Swiss cooperation and background, as well as the future business cooperation. Ms. Wang. Thank you very much. And now I want to share with you about the Swiss market insights. First of all, I want to give you some of the market observation on the policy side and the market side. I also want to talk about the Energy 2050, because in ZEB Talks, it was mentioned before. But in Swiss, the 2050 energy strategy in building, in power, transport, Switzerland wants to have more renewable facilities. So from the current technology to fully explore its potential to make sure the energy is safe. There are three parts to meet that: to lower the energy consumption, raise the efficiency, renewables, and exit the nuclear. While in the energy efficiency, you can see there are specific measures. So, for example, providing tax incentives for retrofitting, raising the efficiency. Well, in the renewable energy, besides expanding the water, hydro, solar, and also the biomass, they also provide a lot of the subsidies for connecting the power into the power grid. And also, I want to say that for new building, the rooftop and walls for more than 300 meters, they need to install the solar system. In autumn of the 2020, all the confederation buildings, they need to have the rooftop solar or wall. On the market side, according to the data, Switzerland by 2050 through the PV to provide 45 TWh, the power. The total potential is more than 100 terawatt hours. Most of them are provided by the buildings. So PV power generation has become the important contributor. By 2050, it will be 12 times of what we have now. According to the research institute, Swiss Solar has analyzed the big potential of Switzerland is to develop the middle and small system on the high buildings and industrial buildings, as well as commercial buildings. That in 2020, the new installed PV capacity was about the 493 megawatts, an increase about 43% to 700 megawatts. So currently, although we don't have the latest data from 2022, we expect to be 800 or 900 megawatts. So if Switzerland wants to finish its transition by 2050, then from 2030, every year they need to expand about 2,000 megawatts. So I also want to talk about the market research of China by SGB. We have done some survey. In the current dual carbon targets, the green building shall not only focus on the single building, but more to the zero carbon smart park or industrial park. We think that this consensus, we have interviewed some CEOs, research institute, real developers. And I think that after many years, the building sectors have a strong capacity and expertise, and also the design capacity of green building can meet the requirement. But many people have also intend to have the high-end product of Switzerland, for example, high-end construction material, door and window, the new wind, ventilation equipment, and testing equipment. For a Swiss company, they focus on the intelligence, system integration, and also regional energy planning. There are a lot of the expertise. But when these are introduced into Chinese market, they also need to be very practical and customized. And when we talk to some local cities and governments, we found the local government are boosting the economy by providing a lot of incentives. We think that for the China-Swiss cooperation, it will be very helpful. So after talking about this market, I also want to talk a little bit on the market entry for both markets. The advantage of Switzerland is that Switzerland is an innovation-driven country. It's highly developed. The quality is well recognized. Capital market is also well established. And in 2022, the China New Energy Enterprise, GDR, has gone to the exchange in Switzerland. There were 9 new energy companies listed in Switzerland, including some related to the green buildings and green technology. By February this year, there are more than 30 companies applying to get listed in Switzerland. So Switzerland is a very mature market with high profitability. For example, in energy storage, the Chinese manufacturers, the profit will be significantly higher in European market than in Chinese market. China also have a huge advantage. Government provided a lot of support of the policy, especially about the new energy manufacturing. The China have the leading position in the energy storage and the new energy sector. And the Chinese domestic market is also very huge, with many candidates for partners. Considering about the global economy, we say that no matter it's the Chinese company or Swiss company, if you go to the other market, you need to be aware of the risks or with less investment and be very cautious. For example, the small business from Switzerland should choose carefully about their local partners. And for Chinese companies, it's the same. At the same time, I also want to say that when coming into the new market, the timing is also very important. So for example, one of our member companies, when they came to China, it was very good. Even during the pandemic, they still have been very profitable, building some new factories. And also, they have taken another Swiss company to provide solutions and a service. But when serving Chinese market with a lot of consumers, the demand is very high and very numerous. So for the small business, if they want to come to Chinese market, they also need to be evaluated on the capacities and service ability. So all of that should be considered. And now we have Swiss investment and trade. This is an introduction of Switzerland. We have also been working with them on the building sector to promote the clean energy enterprise of Switzerland. So I want to share with you this video.
Okay. 那我再来回到这个 PPT 里面去。
So let me go back to the PowerPoint. So finally, I want to summarize about SGB's outlook for China-Swiss cooperation. We hope that we can work together to dedicate to the long-term cooperation of climate change, to develop the new energy and the zero emission. We hope that there will be a lot of the opportunities. Currently, we are trying to have the multi-channel, multi-tiered cooperation. So, for example, we work with the local government to build the Sino-Swiss Zero Emission Technology Industrial Park, focusing on the ZEB and new material and new energy of Switzerland. We also try to establish the China-Switzerland New Industry Fund to provide project support. Some of the projects or product, if they are qualified, we can help with the selling of the products. So we can provide service to the market, visit, attraction of the investment, and the matchmaking of the business and the projects. I also want to talk a little bit of SGB label of the Minergy, the green building label. So after the past few years, actually in the building signs, labels, product, and components, we have a very high quality effect. And when the products are certified, it's helpful for your product to enter into the Swiss market. And some of our partners mentioned they want to work with Minergy to provide training to the Chinese experts. And also we can have the mutual recognition of the credentials. I also want to talking about the CISPA, the Swisspa. This is one of the biggest building exhibition. It will be held from 16th to 19th of January next year. There will be 800 exhibitors, 80,000 visitors. We want to embrace about the solutions and products to shape about the future. We hope that the Chinese partners can also participate.
That concludes my sharing. So I also provide our Swiss Green Buildings official WeChat account. Please scan the QR code and follow our WeChat account. And you can also add me on my personal WeChat account. Thank you so much, Madam Monser. According to the agenda, we also have 15 minutes. And for the different speakers, I could see that in the chat box, there is one question about it is actually a question shared between the different parties. It is about the financial mechanisms, the money raising process. Does the Swiss experts has any experience to share with the Chinese? For example, the PV industry, the solar power industry is actually being sponsored by the governments. So is the fundraising from the private firms or the public funds? So no matter which project, the fundraising is very important. Are there any Swiss experts to share with us your experience in the fundraising and the financial framework? Wesley, how about you? All you colleagues.
Sorry, I had to wait for the translation, but I'm glad to share some insights. Thank you. Well, yeah, thank you also for the question. In Switzerland, it is not, there is no single solution. We have a very complex system in terms of regulations. There are national level regulations. And as I mentioned also earlier, then each canton, and we have 26 cantons in Switzerland, can formulate their own regulations and incentive mechanisms. So just to share one example, there are regions where the public funds are quite limited. And at the same time, business models came up where the people come together in a crowd and have their own fund from which they can also finance then different PV panels or rooftop solutions. In other cantons, the public incentive mechanisms is better, is higher. So there we also see that many investors take advantage of that channel. So it's very different in the Swiss landscape. And if I may invite also our technical lead from the project, Roland Stulz, he can maybe share some more information in this regard, even maybe beyond photovoltaic, Roland. Maybe just to add one note, we are also as the project communicating with financial incentive experts, and we will certainly bring those experts into the project soon to provide insights from Switzerland as well as from the EU, from Europe. So now the question maybe to Roland, if you want to add something.
Yes, thank you, Wesley and Singen. In Switzerland and in many parts of Europe, we have a kind of a interesting experience we go through since we had almost electricity shortage this winter. You know, we were very afraid because of no gas came from Russia, and we had no rain this winter. That means no hydraulic electricity. So now everybody is rushing to build photovoltaic panels on their roofs, on the mountains and everywhere. And financing is not anymore such a big problem because suddenly there seems to be enough money around to invest into photovoltaics. So it's just a switch, you know, from financing other activities to financing photovoltaics and energy saving technologies. So at the moment, since last year, subsidizing is not a central issue, is not such an important issue anymore in terms of photovoltaics and electricity, local electricity, electricity production. One major point is transporting the locally produced electricity to a storage system and from one place to another place. That means high voltage lines through the landscape. You know, that's an important, great financial involvement of the public part. And this is something which has to be planned on the long term. So subsidizing and photovoltaics is not such an issue. And in terms of insulating and renovating buildings, we have a similar experience. We have rather a problem of delivering. The architects, the builders, practitioners in all the fields of energy and buildings are booked out for almost more than a year. So the difficulty is to find photovoltaic panels, which mainly come or almost entirely come from China, and people who can do the work. So subsidies is not such an important issue. The manpower is the main issue, and delivering hardware is an issue, and that's the actual situation in Switzerland, in many European countries. And of course, the other side we see is that renting places, renting apartments gets more and more expensive because of all these investments done on the building sector, in the building sector. The mortgage rate is rising and the renting fees are rising, and that is a social problem.
好的，那谢谢 Wesley，谢谢 Roland 的回答。
Thank you, Wesley and Roland, for your answer.
这个 intep 综合规划咨询责任有限公司的监事会主席。
So here we are. They are also. So Roland is a high-level expert in our project. He provided very important insights to our project. So we also have a few minutes that I like to invite all the distinguished experts to exchange your opinions on one topic. That is to say, our Swiss colleague have some of the initial understandings about the Chinese zero carbon building sectors. So can you evaluate or provide some of the feedback to the Chinese zero carbon emission building standards? Do you think our standards can support China's carbon neutrality target in 2016 and the carbon peaking target in 2030? So what is your opinion about the standards? Thank you.
Wesley,
Yeah, I can go first, and then Roland might be able to add again. So yeah, as Professor Zhang also mentioned before, we had seen 2 drafts of the standard and shared it with our Swiss experts. One of them is the president of the Swiss Association for Architects and Engineers, and he has been on the development of the standard from the beginning. And it seems very likely that the standard will be supportive to reduce and to mitigate the carbon emissions according to the political plans. So it is a very ambitious and technically full of depth standard. Of course, we will continue to cooperate closely with colleagues from CABR when it comes to the adaptation of the standard to the local context, because that is very crucial when it comes to true implementation to the real zero emission buildings that are going to be built in China in the next decades. So I think it has been a great first step on the national level, but it is at the same time super important to continue this ambitious way forward on local level. So much from my side. Roland, if you want to add, please.
Yes, I was very happy to hear from Professor Zhang that you will publish the standard by the end of March. This will be a very important, great step. And I would say I see great possibilities to contribute from our side, from the Swiss side, to how to get into the market, into practice with this standard. Because since we are a small country, everybody knows everybody, you know. In the commissions, you meet always the same people, you know, and they are friends or they don't like each other, doesn't matter. But we can communicate in a very small microcosmos compared to the Chinese cosmos, I would say. And therefore, we could contribute with our experiences from our microcosmos, how to bring the message to the various stakeholders and the people who will be involved with the standard. And my experience is that it is very important to have one address for sending the message. Who is the sender of the message? And the name of the sender of the message, which is probably CABR or a special name, ZEB, CABR, ZEB, Sino-Swiss or whatsoever, but always use the same sender so that the awareness in the market and the awareness in the public area can focus on one sender and then establish a network of people who will be the local transmitters of the message. That sounds a little bit complicated, but I think to set up the communication system and network is going to be quite an important part and an important basis for the success of the ZEB standard. And I would say we would love to be involved in this procedure. And I think we have now a very good and solid basis. We have reached a solid basis with all the activities so far in the last 2 years. It makes a good, comprehensive basis for further steps. And for me now, a very important point will be an activity which will be basic and fundamental is communication. Communicating, informing about experiences with the pilot projects. Then, of course, what does the ZEB standard mean for the local actors, for the investors, for educators, for universities, and so on. There are so many actors who will have to be involved in this whole process. And therefore, I would say, I would recommend that we take this question of communication very seriously, and that we may, in discussion, in a Sino-Swiss discussion, develop possibilities and options for the implementation of the standard, because the standard is so important for a sustainable future of China and of the world, that the implementation of this standard needs to be the best possible. That's a little bit my impression I have, you know, and maybe we can go into more details in the next discussion.
好的，那么非常感谢 Wesley 和 Roland 给我们带来非常宝贵的。
Thank you very much. Thank you for your very good recommendations. And we are coming to the end of our ZEB Talks. And finally, I will invite Ms. GAO Hui to give the final concluding remark. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you. So after about the 1 year, more than 1 year's hard working, we have presented the whole picture of the zero emission buildings. We have organized many seminars and presentations. I think that for the audience, I hope it has been very helpful for you. We have also listened to the shared experience and expertise. We will also continue to work under the project framework, especially after the pandemic. We will organize more activities, no matter it's in the implementation of the standards or demonstration projects or capacity building. We want to organize more activities. I hope that for the guests, you can continue to follow our project. So I want to thank all of you. I also want to thank our experts. Thank you much. Thank you very much, Ms. Gao Hui. And also I want to thank for all the guests. And I want to thank that SDC, MOHERD, and SGB, thank you for their great support. And I hope that you can continue to follow up the news with our ZEB project. So thank you very much.